Hi everyone, welcome to my second ever sketchbook tour. So you are all so lovely after the first one that I thought I would like to share some more of my sketches with you and give you a little peek inside, show you all of my little experiments and preliminary drawings before I go on to working on more finished pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share work throughout several different sketchbooks that I've been working in recently. I seem to have a lot of sketchbooks on the go because I like trying out different formats, different papers and all of that. And I'm going to show you some finished paintings that I've made recently that were inspired by work that was initially in my sketchbook. There's an incredibly loud aeroplane outside. Anyway, let's carry on. Okay, so I won't show you everything that is in all of these sketchbooks, but I will show you a bit from each one. Okay, shall we start with, let's start with the smallest one. So I only have, I think, 3 drawings in this one. Right, I'm gonna just move these out of the way. So I'm afraid this one's a bit of a distance away because I don't want to have to move the camera down, only to move it up again. So we'll just look at this from a distance because there are only a couple in here. So this is a little sketch from when I went to Chartwell in Kent. And you may have seen this in, I think it was my video before this one, so a very recent video. And this was when I did some drawing on location. And this is a very simple little drawing. Can you even see that? Oh yeah, you can see it. Okay, I just had a look in the camera and it's fine. This was when I had like literally between about 5 and 10 minutes and I was sitting in a National Trust garden at Itonmote in Kent, and I just quickly decided that I was going to get my coloured pencils and sketch the flower bed. So this is super simple, super quick. I was hoping to do more sketching that day, but I didn't get the chance, but that's okay because I managed to grab a few minutes just to get something down. And then this reminds me of the day, which is really nice. And I think that's an important part of sketchbooks, is that they are like a, I don't know, like a little journal, like a visual diary of your day sometimes. And just looking at that brings back how I felt during that day. So the other one I have in here is this little one that I did after breakfast one morning. It was such a quick little watercolour sketch. I just sketched a sedge warbler and I was going to leave him like that, and then I decided to just have fun with I was working with a little watercolour and gouache palette and a water brush actually. So I'm kind of getting used to the water brushes at the moment because I want to use them on location. And yeah, I basically just enjoyed myself kind of filling in the page. At first I started writing sedge warbler, then I wrote the date, and then I thought I would add lots of leaves around him. And you'll see a little bit later on how this became a more finished painting. I just want to show you some other birds first so you can see the looser birds I've been working on recently, and then we'll have a look at a couple of finished paintings that I've made. So this is where I think where it all really started with my new style of birds. So one evening just before dinner I sat down and thought, I'm going to just look in a vintage bird book and I'm going to pick a few birds and just work on them as loosely as I possibly can. So I chose the garden warbler, Dartford warbler and sedge warbler that time. I must like a sedge warbler. Anyway, the idea was to kind of break away from my old style of painting birds, which is quite different to this. So my birds used to be very, very stylized and not really based upon real birds. They were like imaginary birds, if you like. And these ones, I wanted to base them on real birds, but also make them stylized, but in a looser way. I hope this is making sense. So I basically did this in a few minutes and just had fun with the colours, with working wet in wet, with watercolour and gouache. I think this might have just been my gouache palette actually. And that one makes me laugh because it looks like he's got such an attitude. I just want to also play around with the writing. So I got my brush and I just, you know, loosely wrote their names. It was just a bit of fun really. But the interesting thing is that from working like this, it loosened me up to a degree so that I could then, when I was working on more finished pieces that were outside of my sketchbook, I could then move in to a slightly different style. It's like it broke the pattern and the habit that I had of doing my birds in a very specific way for years. And so I guess I'll go and get the finished pieces so that I can show you, so you can really see how something comes out of my sketchbook and then goes into a more finished painting. So here we have my 2 finished pieces that kind of came from my experiments in my sketchbook. So this is the finished sedge warbler. So I did him for the 3rd time, and he does resemble a sedge warbler, I think. But I have made him my own by doing the eyes in a very specific way. So I really quite liked the way I did these eyes on these ones, because that's still in shot a little bit, yeah. And I thought I'm going to continue that and carry that over, because I want to, as I said before, make the birds realistic, but also inject them with my style. So the way I do the eyes, I think, is part of this. So these pieces were in watercolour and gouache with coloured pencil over the top. So for the birds, I did that. And then the branches around them, which were obviously based on, on this little painting here. I really liked how I did the loose branches in that sketchbook, and that was just like me playing around and having fun. I didn't know that was going to lead to something, but I really loved how that looked. So I basically transferred it to these. So I did like a bird portrait, and then they're kind of like framed with these branches rather than sitting on a branch or something like that. It's like a portrait of the bird with the branches around, and the branches are in a very loose watercolor style. So I tried to keep those as natural looking as possible. They're still a bit stylized, but so yeah, that's how those became these more finished pieces. And I'm going to show you, I think, a few more birds that I've been playing around with recently in my sketchbooks. So first of all, you may have seen these. I think I may have shown you these quickly in another video recently. But these were from a session, a Zoom session I did with Crixus. I've written Crickis here, which really annoys me, but never mind, it's only in my sketchbook. I did, these were time drawings. There was a nuthatch, and I've written a cute fat blackbird because he really was quite a chunky blackbird. And I did these so quickly, but I really liked how they turned out. And I think this might have been one of my first attempts at looser birds. So yeah, that's a combination of watercolour, gouache, and a Derwent Inktense pencil in the colour Bark over the top. The Inktense pencils are brilliant over watercolour. You can go over the watercolour when it's wet because they're water-soluble pencils, and it creates a really interesting effect. Or you can go over when it's dry as well if you want more texture. Just really good. A great thing to have if you're drawing on location and you want something that can go over something that's wet very quickly and all of that. So yeah, I think that's, oh, I'm going to show you those in a minute. Yeah, we won't look at any more in that one at the moment. Okay, so from the same session, I have this little chaffinch. I don't know, I haven't put the times down, but they were like, I think about, I want to say like 10 minutes or something like that. And then I did this flock of birds. Now, birds flying, I think these are geese or something, but flying birds have always been something that I found really difficult to get right. I do them like in a tiny way in my landscape paintings, but it was a really good exercise for me to actually do these ones, like really observe them and see how their wings looked and the shape of them and all of that. And this was in the Derwent Inktense box, so I used it as, I think I loosely drew them and then got a wet watercolour brush and went over them and kind of did a wash and then went back in to do details. So yeah, it's a great thing if you basically want to work really quickly. I mean, you can work monochromatically and it looks fantastic. I love the Inktense pencil in bark in particular. So the other bird I did from the Crixus session that time in June, in early June, was this blue tit. And so that was just a few minutes. It was a time drawing again, and I just did that really quickly. And I loved the way that it was forcing me to work loosely. And I found that my birds have more kind of energy and, I don't know, life, I suppose, if I do them quite quickly and I allow the paint to just run. And I don't know, there's something about the marks and the way it looks, it just has more life. So it's been a great exercise for me. So this is a sketchbook I was using for a 30-day project on my Patreon. And it's still an ongoing project, and I started by working in another sketchbook, then switched to this one. There are 30 different prompts. If you're on my Patreon, there's a post there for all paid tiers. You can access the prompts if you want to draw along with me. But I'm still working on the project. It was supposed to be a 30-day project where I did it all in a month. I thought then it might take me 2 months, but actually I'm going into month 3 now. So it's quite funny that it's taking me so long. But the reason for that is that I'm doing a lot of experimentation during this project. And I've actually ended up switching to something else entirely. So I'm no longer working on the project in this sketchbook. I'm actually doing something different, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. I haven't even told my patrons what it is, so you're gonna have to wait for that one. But these little chaps and chapesses, a chap and chapess, were black caps. So these are based on black caps, it's hard to say. And I'm trying to kind of base them on real birds again and observe the real birds, but make them stylized. And I really enjoyed working on those. And these ones, this is a chaffinch. I think this is a, male and female chaffinch. So on each one I did the male and the female. So yeah, I was quite pleased with how these turned out. They didn't take me very long. I worked very loosely again. And so I think that's all the birds that I've been working on recently. As you can see, there's quite a few in my sketchbooks before I really move out of the sketchbook and try and attempt a more finished piece. But all of this sketchbook work has meant that I've been able to break free from my old way of thinking and working, and I've been able to move my birds on to this new era of birds. And it's been a lot of fun as well. So I'm sure some of you can remember my older birds, and you'll see that these are different, but hopefully they still have my style. They still look like my work. So those are the birds. I want to share some buildings with you in a moment, because I've been working on houses that are not just my little white houses. I'm moving away, or not away from those because I'll still paint them, but I'm kind of known for my little white houses for absolutely years, like literally for nearly all of my career, I've painted little white houses. And I'm now starting to experiment with painting other buildings and other houses, and you'll see how my sketchbook work kind of helped me to develop my visual language with those as well. But maybe first what we'll do is I'll just share a bit of this sketchbook. So these are some of the prompts, but obviously, as I've said, I'm now doing something different with this project. But the prompt here was rain, and I just used my deep light watercolours. By the way, in this project, I should just mention this, I'm using the 2 sets that I've curated, 2 watercolour sets that I curated for deep light. They are Latvian handmade watercolour makers. I have a link in the description box beneath every video, so you can go down there, you can have a look. If you feel like treating yourself, I have a discount code which is down there as well. But what I'm doing is I'm, for this project, only allowed to use, I've given myself limitations, so I'm only allowed to use my 2 palettes that I've put together for them, plus white gouache and black gouache if needed. So I'm not allowed to use mixed media. I really like working in mixed media, so it's been hard to just stick to watercolour with a little bit of gouache, but it's good practice. It's good to have limitations sometimes. Anyway, I was playing around with just this raindrop pattern, so that was for the prompt rain. This was, I think, lake or pond. I haven't actually got the prompts in front of me, so I hope I'm getting these right. This is lake or pond, and yeah, just there's my little classic white house. So yeah, I used a little bit of gouache with this one as well. I mixed the gouache, actually, I mixed the white gouache with a deep, deep light colour to go over the top in places. This prompt was Country Lane. So that was quite nice to work in those colours. That's something a little bit different. And I worked a bit wet in wet there as well, and then I let it dry and then worked over the top. So this prompt was old building, and for this one I actually worked on, well, I based this building on a photo my mum took of a building in Suffolk, maybe I think about 3 or 4 years ago now at least. And I really loved this building. I loved the shape of it. I loved the unusual placement of the windows. And so I thought I would simplify it and pop it into a landscape that was kind of based on the landscape it was in, but not really. I have kind of changed a few aspects here. But yeah, that's kind of a slightly different style of house than I would normally paint, and I really enjoyed it. So this was the pebbles or stones prompt, and there I am practicing writing in just watercolour, just using my brush. I used to experiment with lettering years ago, and I stopped doing it. And the reason I stopped doing it is because I kept trying to make, this is the problem I have throughout my whole my whole art career, is that I keep trying to make things perfect, and things look better when they're not perfect. So years ago, when I would do hand lettering, I'd keep trying to make the lettering look as if it was perfect. And because it's impossible, or almost impossible, unless you're incredibly skilled and talented, to actually be able to paint something perfectly. If it's slightly imperfect and you're trying to make it perfect, it looks off. Something just looks off. It looks a bit stiff and it doesn't have any character, and it's not quite perfect, so it hasn't got that quality, but it also doesn't have the quality of having character. And so I have allowed myself recently to be experimenting with my writing a little bit more and just allowing it to be whatever it is. I love that handwritten quality. I love that imperfection. And this is what I'm trying to do both throughout my artwork now and also with the hand lettering. I'm going to be experimenting more with the hand lettering. I've been inspired by both Crixus and Dominic, who Dominic has recently started doing some hand lettering. He has all of these lovely dip pens, and he got out the dip pens and the Winsor & Newton ink the other week, and he was doing all this wonderful writing. And watching him and watching Crixus, I'm like, of course I can do it. I just need to allow myself to do it. It's like breaking through those mental barriers again. I hope all of this is making sense, by the way. Whenever I record these, I always think, when I'm like editing them, I always think, I wish I'd have said this or that, or I shouldn't have said this, I should have put it like this. It's very hard when you're sitting down in front of a camera and you have a lot of thoughts to get them all out and to have them all make sense. So anyway, I hope this makes sense. I hope I'm explaining it well. Okay, so this one is called Into the, well, I've written Into the Woods. The prompt was, I think, forest, trees, forest, I can't remember now, forest, I think. So I was just experimenting with the writing again. This one was treetops. Now for this one, I used the colour Natasha's Grey, which I developed with Deep Deep Light as a grey that can be used for so many different things. It can be used for distant hills, stormy skies, seas. It can be used monochromatically because it has such a variation in tone. You can use it like in the mass tone here, or in a wash here. This is all the same colour. I mean, this is incredible, right? When you use it in a wash, you get to see all of these different colours coming through. And then in mass tone, it's almost like a charcoal grey. It's a brilliant colour. I absolutely love what they did for me. When I described to them the type of colour I wanted to have, they came up with this. They did a really good job. So yeah, check out the description beneath the video if you're interested in having a look at their paints any further, but I love it for monochromatic work. Shall I show you the other pieces in here? Maybe I will. So I did 2 prompts on one page, bark and branch. I really like how I've done the bark on this. I actually wish I'd have just left, like if we imagine that covered up. Let me have a look at that through the camera. Yeah, like I'm trying to cover it with my jumper. There we go. Yeah, I like that. Wish I hadn't written that bit, but there we go. It's a sketchbook. That's unfinished. And then we have my little birds. And as I say, I have moved on to doing something else with this project, which I will share with you at some point soon. So I wanted to quickly share with you something that you probably haven't seen from me before, and that's cats. So I have done cats a couple of times in the past, but I'm really not, as much as I'm a cat lover, I'm obsessed with cats, and I've had cats my whole life. I don't actually paint them. I painted them a couple of times over the years, but it's rare for me to paint cats. So during this Patreon session, I worked on these. This is 5 minutes each drawing, so super quick drawings of a subject that I'm not used to painting. And this was in Derwent Inktense again, so that's the bark pencil used wet and dry. And then I did this 10-minute drawing of a grumpy cat in a suitcase. So I really love him. Look at his expression. He had such a funny expression, this cat, and it was really fun to paint something that I wouldn't ordinarily paint and just do it against the clock as well. So again, Derwent Inktense in bark, really versatile, lovely colour. I don't think I've got anything in there. I don't think there was anything else. I think I've shown you the other things in this sketchbook. So we will take these and I will share with you maybe my houses now. Actually, before I share the houses, I have the new Pith sketchbook here. Now this is this the Lumia? I think it is. I think it's called Lumia, something like that. I have 2 of their new sizes, the Cara and the Lumia. And this one I started during one of my Patreon sessions with my patrons. And I haven't finished it actually. I started it, ran out of time, and I have done a little bit. So I did all of the watercolour and gouache painting. I think it was mainly gouache actually, during the session. And then I went in and I've done a little bit of coloured pencil over the top, but I haven't finished it yet. So as it is at the moment, it's unfinished. These ones were something I did the other day. This is one of Crixus's sessions, and this was a landscapes and clouds session. She actually had 4 images, but I only had time to do 3 of them. They're 20 minutes each, and clouds are not something that, again, I'm really like confident or comfortable in painting. So this was a really good exercise for me. And I basically worked with that little kit that I put together in the last video you saw on YouTube, the Sendak mini artist roll, the little kit I've put together for that. I used that, but I did add on this one a little bit of white neo colour over the top in the sky, just to kind of knock back. I made it very, very dark and very stormy looking, and I wanted to knock it back a bit, so I've layered here. But it's mainly from my little watercolour and gouache palette with coloured pencil over the top. So yeah, I think this was the only one I used neo colour in. I did add a Derwent Drawing Chinese white pencil over the top of that one. I think I'm going to add a white pencil to that kit, by the way, because I find them really useful for knocking things back. But yeah, just basically 3 little landscapes, 20 minutes each one. I didn't join in with the live session that time. I watched a replay and just did these after breakfast one morning. So I had fun working on those, but that's all I've got in this sketchbook because I only started it literally the other day. So this is another sketchbook I've been using during my Zoom sessions, and this one, it says here, I'll just read to you what I've written. I sometimes like to put notes in my sketchbooks to remind me. Based on C.F. Tunnicliffe's illustration on page 47 of What to Look For in Winter, a Ladybird nature book first published in 1959. This was during a Zoom meetup with my Patreon members on the 13th of June, and I finished it on the 14th, so I started it during that session. We were chatting so much, I didn't get that much done, and I finished it the next morning. But this is a book that was given to me last Christmas by my friend Kirsty, and I treasure it. I absolutely love this book, and the illustrations in it, these vintage illustrations, are just so lovely. So it was like a good exercise for me to try and attempt to draw one of them. So I used, I think this is mainly Derwent Drawing pencils with, so Derwent Drawing coloured pencils with, I think I might have used, I think that green is a luminance, maybe the dark phthalocyanine green. Okay, this was another Zoom session with my patrons. This was on Saturday the 29th of June, and in this one I was concentrating on painting different cottages. So these are purely in gouache. I used my little gouache palettes, my art toolkit palettes that I've shared with you before, and yeah, I thought this will really push me into working in a slightly different way when it comes to houses, and I realised I enjoyed this so much. It was so freeing. I can't even tell you. It was like, these were timed. I'm trying to think how much time I had. I can't remember now, but they were timed paintings, and I knew that I couldn't fiddle too much. I just had to do it. There was no pre-planning. I didn't sketch beforehand. I just went in there with the brush and the paint. And this is what I'm doing now with my buildings when I'm painting buildings, and I'm going to show you a couple of finished ones in a moment. But I'm actually just going in straight away with paint. I'm not doing any sketching beforehand, and this is allowing me to keep these like slightly looser. And I'm actually calling them my wonky houses because some of them turn out quite wonky when you don't plan them out beforehand, but they have so much more character and I love it. Anyway, oh, there's another bird. So this is a little stock dove I did. This was just, I was challenging myself to do a stock dove in 25 minutes. And this is a little palette. So this was in July. And it was a little palette that I've made of 6 watercolours, all Wallace Seymour apart from the Daniel Smith Buff Titanium, in my Peganol Petra Painters palette. Yeah, so 25 minutes. I didn't have the proper stock dove colours, so I just made do with what I had in that palette. And I love the granulation and the texture this has. He almost looks like he's made of stone. He looks a bit like a statue, doesn't he? So let's move on to the buildings now. So this is Hatchlands Park in Surrey. This is a National Trust property. I went there with Dominic the other week, and this painting featured in a recent Patreon video and also in a post where I talked about how I'm trying to develop this new style of painting houses and also allowing myself to paint houses that I otherwise would have deemed too complex, too difficult. So to put this in a nutshell, I for years have convinced myself that I'm no good at painting complicated buildings. I feel quite confident with landscapes and trees and obviously birds. I've painted birds a lot and other nature-based subjects, but when it comes to buildings, I put my little white cottages in, and they've become a bit of a trademark. And I know that people love them and I love them too, but I've always convinced myself, and it's weird how we do this with ourselves, even somebody like me who's been an artist for absolutely years, we convince ourselves that we can't do certain things or that we're no good at them. And for me, it was buildings that were a bit more architecturally complex, that have lots of angles, that are a bit more, well, just complicated in general to draw or paint. I always looked at them. I love these types of buildings. I visit a lot of old properties and I feel, I don't know, I feel so at home amongst, I know it sounds really weird, amongst old buildings or in the grounds of old buildings. I feel really at peace. I don't know, it's really hard to explain it. Anyway, I love them so much, but I've never allowed myself to paint them because I always thought the angles are too difficult. How am I going to translate this into my style? If I paint them, what if I get the angles wrong? It's going to look really amateurish. It's going to look really bad. And so I would never paint them, even though I really wanted to. I find this really sad that there was something that I really love. There's such a big part of my life that I wanted to paint and I wouldn't allow myself to do it. So I'm allowing myself to do it now. And I have decided that I'm just going to go for it. They're going to be wonky. So with this one again, I went in straight away with paint and it just formed as it was. Its angles aren't correct, you know, and this is fine. I've looked at so many different artists' work and I've noticed that the buildings I love are the ones that are slightly wonky, that are slightly folk arty or have a sort of illustrative style. I'm not looking for something that is like a photograph or like an architectural drawing. That's not what I want to do. And so, but it's weird because even though I know that's not what I want to do, that's what I'm striving for. If ever I'm drawing, everything has to be so precise, so neat, so accurate. It's like this way of thinking is just so tiring and it takes all the joy out of art. So anyway, long story short, well, probably long story long, to be honest, I have just decided I'm going to go for it. And if the buildings are wonky, they'll be all the better for it. So with this one, I went in with the gouache, just did the building, did the trees, and then I went over the top with some pencil details here and there. And I'm really liking this way of working where I work with the gouache or watercolour and do the coloured pencils over the top. And I feel like, as I wrote on Patreon, this piece was the piece, along with these ones at the beginning, that really made me feel that I can tackle any building. I can just do it in my own way. And it's such a freeing feeling and I'm enjoying working on different buildings so much. You'll be seeing more of that soon. Anyway, let's go on to something else. That's a page that I was testing colours on. Okay, we'll have a look at the other pages in here, and then I'm going to show you the house that started a new series of houses that I'm now working on. Okay, sorry, this is so long-winded. Anyway, this was actually, to deviate and go off on a tangent, this was a Patreon session, landscapes in black and white and animals in black and white, And this is funny, he makes me laugh so much. This is a dog, it looks like a wolf or something. Little pig, little cat, zebra. Oh my God, zebras are so difficult to paint. Who knew that zebras were so difficult to paint? Anyway, he was standing sort of strangely as well, so it was really hard. These are only 5 to 10 minutes each, these drawings, or paintings rather. So I'm up against the clock. I have no time to adjust or fiddle with things. Okay, so yeah, little landscapes there. And for this I used, I think, Payne's Grey, gouache, watercolour, gouache, something like that. This was a Tiny Treasures themed Zoom session that Crixus and I hosted on the 13th of July. And I had fun going back to my roots, because I always used to paint objects and still life at the beginning of my career. And it was really fun to go back to that kind of subject. It's honestly made me want to do them again. I want to do so much more with this, but we had timed drawings. So all of these were just, I don't know, between I think about 5 and maybe 20 minutes for the slightly more complex ones. It doesn't look like I spent 20 minutes on any of these, to be honest, but I had a lot of fun. Some of them are in gouache, some of them are in coloured pencil. Yeah, that was really fun. Okay, so I think this is the last sketchbook piece I'm going to share with you, because this is going to be a long video if I keep rambling on. Okay, so this one says Another Wonky House, 17th of July 24. And I've written so much fun because I had such a lot of fun working on this piece. This is from an image I found online of a house in the English countryside. It's a royalty-free image, so you're allowed to draw from it. And I decided, right, I'm just going to pick a house and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. I'm going to do it quite quickly. I don't know how long this took, but it wasn't that long. And I just got my gouache palette, I got my coloured pencils, and I did this layering again where I work in gouache to begin with, or watercolour, and then I go over the top in pencil and kind of add texture and pattern and I don't know, just a bit more depth really. So from this piece in my sketchbook, I'm now going to share with you some paintings I've made that are more finished type of paintings outside of my sketchbook that will be for sale in my next shop update. Okay, so here they are. These are the slightly more finished pieces. When I was moving out of my sketchbook onto loose sheets of paper, now this is fancy paper. This is the Saunders Waterford 640 GSM or £300 paper, so it's super thick, really nice quality watercolour paper. And I thought I'm going to start small, so I worked on these ones first. And I'm calling this my Tiny English Houses series, and the slightly larger ones are all going to have actual names. So this is Tiny English Houses number 1, this is Tiny English Houses number 2. So we're gonna, if they're smaller than 6 by 4 inches, this one's 5 by 5, just to give you an idea, they're going to go in the Tiny English Houses category. So tiny paintings, like either miniature paintings like this one or just small paintings. Anything larger, so this is slightly larger, this is an 8 by 6 inch painting, these are going to have names. So this one's actually called Bramble Cottage, and all of these I worked with either gouache or watercolour, and some of these are deep light watercolours on these too, by the way. And then I did coloured pencil over the top, so I went in and did a bit more detail with the pencil. But you can see that I've finally managed to develop a different way of doing houses, and I'm really excited to see where this is going to lead. So I feel now that I can tackle almost any building. This is crazy. I've gone from somebody who only painted little white cottages, or I think I may have done a couple of other cottages, but they were kind of similar. They were that very basic, very simple style. And I'm now at the stage where I feel like I could paint whatever building I like. It doesn't matter if the angles are slightly off. In fact, they're all the better for it. And I'm just having a lot of fun. So I hope this has been encouraging or inspiring to you. If you're telling yourself that there's something that you can't paint and you really, really want to paint it, it's something that you love, just do it. Don't let this fear hold you back, and don't let this perfectionism, if you have it too, hold you back. Just have fun. Sketchbooks have been so instrumental in helping me to evolve my style. There's so much more that's going on behind the scenes. I'm kind of giving you a snapshot today, and I hope that you've really enjoyed this. I hope that you've, liked seeing the work, and you've liked seeing a little bit of what goes on in my brain, in my sketchbooks, and how I develop things. If you did, give this video a thumbs up. If you can do that, that makes it makes a lot of difference, because it helps YouTube to know that people are enjoying it, and they then roll it out, if I'm lucky, to other people, which is brilliant. Then other people find my channel. So if you could do that, I'd be really, really grateful if you enjoyed this or found it valuable in any way. And I will keep you posted about how this all develops, and all of these pieces that are loose be available in my next shop update. So if you want to know when that is, please join the mailing list. I'll leave a link for that below as well, so just scroll down through the description underneath this video and you'll find all the info you need to know. Okay, thanks everyone. I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.